In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where plasma rifles could vaporize entire city blocks and quantum cannons could crack planets, there existed weapons so advanced that they seemed like magic to lesser civilizations. The Galactic Defense Coalition prided itself on possessing the most sophisticated arsenal in known space. Energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts, molecular disruptors that could unmake matter at the atomic level, and gravitational pulse weapons that could crush fleets like tin cans. So when Sergeant Marcus Bulldog Harrison stepped off the transport ship carrying what looked like a primitive metal contraption, the alien soldiers couldn't contain their amusement. Here was a human veteran, scarred and weathered from countless battles across the Outer Rim, clutching what appeared to be an antique from his species' violent past. The weapon looked crude, mechanical, almost barbaric compared to their sleek energy weapons that hummed with contained power. The Zephyrian troops, with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons, clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The towering Cromnac warriors, standing nearly 10 feet tall with their bio-enhanced muscles and neural implants, rumbled with deep, mocking chuckles. Even the diminutive but highly intelligent Vex engineers, floating in their anti-gravity suits, emitted the electronic chirps that indicated their species' equivalent of ridicule. But Sergeant Harrison had seen something in his 43 years of military service that none of these advanced beings had witnessed. He had fought in the siege of Kepler 442b, where human forces held off a Zerathi invasion for 6 months with nothing but determination and what the galaxy considered primitive kinetic weapons. He had survived the massacre at Titan Station, where energy weapons failed due to electromagnetic interference, but his old reliable tools kept firing. He had earned 17 commendations, lost half his original unit, and gained a reputation that preceded him across 3-star systems. The weapon he carried was an M249 squad automatic weapon, a piece of human engineering that had served his species faithfully for over 2 centuries. While the galaxy had moved on to energy-based warfare, humans had continued to perfect and maintain their kinetic weapons arsenal, not out of stubbornness or inability to adapt, but because they understood something that their alien allies had forgotten in their rush toward technological supremacy. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and sometimes what looked primitive to advanced eyes was actually the perfect tool for the job at hand. As the mixed coalition forces prepared for what their intelligence suggested would be a routine suppression mission against Zerathi insurgents on the mining planet Karath 7, none of the alien soldiers suspected that they were about to witness a demonstration that would fundamentally change their understanding of human military doctrine. They were about to learn why humanity had earned its place among the stars not through superior technology, but through something far more dangerous: adaptability, persistence, and an intimate understanding of violence that transcended any single tool or weapon system. The mission briefing was about to begin, and with it a lesson in warfare that would echo through Coalition military academies for generations to come. The briefing room aboard the Coalition dreadnought Stellar Harmony buzzed with the ambient energy of advanced alien technology. Holographic displays flickered with tactical data, while translation matrices hummed softly, converting the various alien languages into comprehensible communication. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the diverse atmospheric needs of a dozen different species, creating a cocktail of gases that would have been toxic to most single-species crews. Sergeant Marcus Harrison sat in a chair designed for humanoid physiology, though it had clearly been built with the taller Andromedans in mind. His feet barely touched the floor, but he maintained perfect military posture despite the awkward seating. The M249 saw rested across his lap, its worn but meticulously maintained surface a stark contrast to the gleaming energy weapons surrounding him. To his left, the Zephyrian squad leader, named Clixonair Vex, adjusted his crystalline battle armor with 4 hands while his compound eyes tracked the holographic briefing materials. The Zephyrian's plasma rifle hung from a specialized mount that interfaced directly with his exoskeleton's power core, creating a seamless fusion of biology and technology that had taken their species 3,000 years to perfect. On Harrison's right, a massive Cromnac trooper designated as Warsinger Thok Magnus checked his molecular disruptor's charge levels through a neural interface that flickered behind his eyes. The weapon itself was a marvel of engineering, capable of breaking the atomic bonds of any matter it touched, reducing even the hardest battlefield fortifications to their component elements in seconds. Behind them, a full squad of Vex engineers floated in their anti-gravity suits, their small humanoid forms barely visible within the technological marvels that kept them mobile and combat effective. Each Vex carried a gravitational pulse weapon that could create localized black holes or repulse fields strong enough to deflect incoming artillery. The mission briefing began with Commander Zelthara, a 7-foot-tall Andromedan whose species had been spacefaring when humans were still discovering fire. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in 3 major galactic conflicts, and her bioluminescent skin patterns shifted to indicate serious tactical consideration. Intelligence reports indicate that a cell of Zarathi insurgents has established a fortified position in the abandoned mining complex on Karath 7, she began, her words automatically translated into each species' native language. The facility consists of interconnected underground tunnels spanning approximately 50 square kilometers. The insurgents have been raiding coalition supply convoys for the past 6 months, and their activities have escalated to include attacks on civilian settlements. The holographic display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the mining complex. The tunnels formed a maze-like network that extended deep into the planet's crust, with multiple entrance points scattered across a mountainous region. Sensor data revealed the presence of approximately 200 Zarathi fighters, along with captured coalition equipment that had been modified for their use. The Zarathi have proven particularly resourceful in their defensive preparations, Commander Zelthara continued. They've installed energy shields at key choke points and have been using captured plasma weaponry to create overlapping fields of fire. Our standard assault protocols call for the use of quantum bombardment to collapse the tunnel system, but civilian mining operations in adjacent sectors make that approach unacceptable. Click-and-Air Vex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Commander, my squad's plasma rifles should be sufficient to overcome their defensive positions. Zephyrian thermal technology can cut through most known shielding materials given sufficient time and power allocation. Warsinger Thok Magnus rumbled his agreement, the sound reverberating through his massive chest. The Cromnak will break their strongest positions. Our molecular disruptors care nothing for their captured shields. We will unmake their defenses at the atomic level. The Vex squad leader, whose electronic voice emerged from speakers built into his anti-gravity suit, added his analysis. Gravitational pulse weapons will be highly effective in the confined tunnel environment. We can create localized spatial distortions that will crush their defensive emplacements regardless of energy shielding. Commander Zelthara's skin patterns shifted to acknowledge their input, but her expression remained concerned. Your confidence is noted and appreciated. However, intelligence also indicates that the Zarathi have been experimenting with electromagnetic pulse devices salvaged from destroyed coalition vehicles. Our energy-based weapons may be vulnerable to disruption, and the metallic composition of the mining tunnels will amplify any EMP effects. This revelation caused a stir among the alien troops. Energy weapons have been the backbone of galactic warfare for millennia. The idea that primitive electromagnetic pulses could neutralize their advanced systems was both surprising and concerning. Most species had abandoned kinetic weapons generations ago, viewing them as relics of less sophisticated civilizations. Harrison listened to the discussion with growing interest but remained silent. In his decades of service, he had learned that the first rule of being the only human in a room full of aliens was to speak only when you had something valuable to contribute. His experience in asymmetric warfare had taught him to identify opportunities that others might miss, but earning the respect of alien soldiers required patience and timing. The briefing continued with detailed analysis of the Zarathi defensive positions, their likely tactical doctrines, and the coalition's planned approach. The strategy being developed relied heavily on the overwhelming technological superiority of their energy weapons, with contingencies based on deploying heavier quantum artillery if the initial assault encountered unexpected resistance. As the discussion progressed, Harrison began to see the fundamental flaw in their thinking. These highly advanced warriors were approaching the problem like engineers trying to solve a technical challenge. when what they needed was the mindset of hunters stalking dangerous prey. The Zarathi weren't just insurgents hiding in tunnels. They were desperate fighters who had turned those tunnels into a fortress specifically designed to neutralize the Coalition's technological advantages. The abandoned mining complex wasn't just a hiding place for the Zarathi. It was a carefully chosen battlefield where they could leverage their knowledge of human military tactics against opponents who had never faced truly adaptive guerrilla warfare. The electromagnetic pulse devices were just the beginning. In those tunnels, with their metal walls and confined spaces, energy weapons would be more liability than asset. But kinetic weapons? Kinetic weapons didn't care about electromagnetic interference. They didn't rely on power cells or quantum matrices. They operated on principles of physics that have been universal since the first multicellular organisms developed the ability to throw rocks at their enemies. Point, aim, fire. No sophisticated targeting systems to be jammed, no energy signatures to be detected, no complex mechanisms to fail under adverse conditions. When Commander Zelthara asked for final input before finalizing the assault plan, Harrison finally spoke up. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had survived situations that had killed better-equipped soldiers. "Ma'am, I'd like to suggest a modification to the approach. The Zarathi have been studying coalition tactics for 6 months. They know how our energy weapons work. They know our standard assault procedures, and they've prepared specifically to counter our technological advantages. But they've never faced a human kinetic weapons specialist in that kind of environment." The room fell silent. The alien soldiers turned to look at the human sergeant with expressions that ranged from polite interest to barely concealed skepticism. His weapon looked like something that belonged in a museum, not on a battlefield against enemies equipped with captured coalition technology. Klixenar Vex was the first to respond, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "Sergeant Harrison, with respect to your service record, your weapon appears to be a chemical propulsion system designed to accelerate solid projectiles. How exactly do you propose to engage enemies protected by energy shields and armed with plasma weapons using such primitive technology?" Harrison's response was calm and matter-of-fact. "Sir, this primitive technology has been killing people efficiently for over 800 years of human military history. It doesn't need power cells. It doesn't generate energy signatures that can be detected at range, and electromagnetic pulses won't shut it down. In a tunnel environment where your plasma rifles might overload from reflected energy and your molecular disruptors could bring down the ceiling, this old-fashioned bullet thrower will keep working." Warsinger Thok Magnus leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human sergeant. "You speak of efficiency, small warrior, but efficiency must be measured against effectiveness. Your projectiles cannot penetrate modern defensive systems. They lack the energy density to overwhelm shielding technology." The sergeant's smile was thin, but confident. "Sir, that assumes they're using the shields correctly. Energy barriers are designed to stop energy weapons. They're optimized for dispersing plasma bursts and deflecting particle beams. But they're not particularly effective against high-velocity kinetic projectiles, especially when those projectiles are designed to penetrate hardened targets." He hefted the M249 slightly, his weathered hands moving over the weapon with the unconscious familiarity of decades of use. "This fires 5.56mm rounds at roughly 900 meters per second. Each round carries approximately 1,700 joules of kinetic energy. But more importantly, it fires them in sustained bursts that can place 200 rounds per minute on target. Energy shields are designed to absorb and disperse energy over time. They're not designed to handle sustained kinetic impact from multiple projectiles hitting the same point repeatedly." Commander Zelthara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate deep consideration. "Your analysis has merit, Sergeant, but it assumes you can achieve accurate fire in a tunnel environment against enemies who will be actively trying to kill you. How do you propose to leverage your weapon's advantages while minimizing your exposure to their superior range and firepower?" Harrison's expression grew serious, the look of a professional soldier discussing his craft. "Ma'am, humans have been fighting in confined spaces for our entire military history. We've developed tactics specifically for urban warfare, tunnel fighting, and close-quarters combat that don't rely on technological superiority. What I'm proposing isn't just about my weapon. It's about using human tactical doctrine to approach this problem differently. The briefing room remained silent as the alien warriors considered this perspective. They were accustomed to overwhelming their enemies through superior technology and firepower. The idea of deliberately entering a disadvantageous tactical situation and relying on skill and adaptability rather than advanced equipment was foreign to their military traditions. Harrison continued, his voice taking on the instructional tone of an experienced sergeant training new recruits. The Zarathi are expecting us to approach this like a conventional coalition assault. They've prepared for energy weapons, automated systems, and overwhelming force applied from range. They haven't prepared for someone to get close, stay mobile, and engage them with weapons and tactics they don't understand. He paused, looking around the room at the assembled alien warriors. In those tunnels, your plasma rifles will light you up like beacons for anyone with thermal sensors. Your molecular disruptors will alert them to your presence from hundreds of meters away. But this old kinetic weapon? It's quiet, it's simple, and it's designed to work in exactly the kind of environment where your advanced systems become liabilities. The silence stretched for several long moments before Commander Zelthara spoke again. Very well, Sergeant Harrison. You will be integrated into the assault team as a specialist consultant. However, you will be accompanied by a full squad of Zephyrian shock troops to ensure your survival in the event that your tactical assessment proves incorrect. Harrison nodded respectfully. Understood, Mom. I appreciate the backup, but I think you'll find that sometimes the old ways work better than anyone expects. As the briefing concluded and the various alien squads began their pre-mission preparations, Harrison remained seated for a moment, checking his weapon one final time. The M249 had served his species faithfully through countless conflicts, and he had a feeling that it was about to remind the galaxy why humans had earned their reputation as the most adaptable warriors in known space. The mission would begin in 6 hours, and, with it, a demonstration that would challenge everything the Coalition thought it knew about modern warfare. The dropship Swift Retribution descended through the thick atmosphere of Karath 7, its stealth systems working overtime to avoid detection by the Zarathi sensors scattered throughout the mining region. The planet's rust-colored surface stretched endlessly beneath them, broken only by the jagged peaks of the Valar Mountains where their target waited deep underground. Inside the cramped troop compartment, the assault team made their final preparations. The environmental systems struggled to accommodate the diverse atmospheric needs of the mixed-species crew, creating a humid, recycled atmosphere that smelled of ozone and alien biochemistry. Sergeant Harrison sat strapped into his harness, methodically checking his equipment one final time. His assault pack contained 12 magazines for the M249, each loaded with armor-piercing rounds that had been specifically designed for human military doctrine. Unlike his alien companions, who relied on sophisticated targeting systems and computerized ammunition selection, Harrison's preparation was entirely manual and tactile. Beside him, Clix and Aravex made final adjustments to his plasma rifle's power coupling, his 4 hands moving in a complex dance of switches and calibrations. The Zephyrian's compound eyes tracked multiple readouts simultaneously, monitoring everything from thermal output to quantum flux stabilization. His weapon was a masterpiece of engineering that required constant fine-tuning to maintain peak performance. Human warrior, Clix Aravex, clicked in his translated voice. Your preparation ritual is remarkably brief compared to proper weapons maintenance protocols. Are you certain your primitive projectile system is functioning within acceptable parameters? Harrison looked up from checking his magazine springs, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sir, one of the advantages of primitive technology is that there isn't much to go wrong. As long as the firing pin hits the primer and the barrel isn't obstructed, this weapon will fire. No quantum matrices to destabilize, no plasma conduits to overheat, no power cells to drain at inconvenient moments. Warsinger Thok Magnus rumbled from across the compartment, his massive frame making the military seating look like children's furniture. Simplicity has its merits, small warrior, but complexity provides capability. My molecular disruptor can unmake any target regardless of composition or density. Your projectiles can be stopped by sufficiently thick armor or energy shielding. Harrison nodded respectfully. That's absolutely true, sir. Your weapon can do things mine never could. But my weapon can do things in situations where yours might not function at all. In 30 seconds of sustained fire, I can put 100 rounds down range without worrying about heat buildup, power management, or system overload. Sometimes volume of fire matters more than individual shot effectiveness. The Vex squad leader floated nearby in his anti-gravity suit, his electronic voice joining the conversation. Sergeant Harrison raises an interesting point about sustained engagement capabilities. Our gravitational pulse weapons require significant cooldown periods between shots to prevent spatial distortion feedback. However, the energy output per shot is orders of magnitude greater than kinetic projectiles. Harrison appreciated that the alien warriors were taking his tactical inputs seriously, even if they remained skeptical about his equipment. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Your weapons are incredibly powerful, but they're designed for specific tactical situations. My weapon is designed to be adaptable. It can provide suppressive fire, precision shots, area denial, or close-quarters defense depending on how it's employed. The drop ship shuddered slightly as it entered the planet's lower atmosphere. Through the small porthole beside his seat, Harrison could see the mining complex growing larger below them. The facility looked like a metallic cancer on the mountainside, with dozens of tunnel entrances and ventilation shafts creating a honeycomb pattern across several square kilometers. Commander Zelthara's voice came over the intercom, her bioluminescent translation patterns visible even through the speakers. Final approach in progress. Intelligence indicates no active sensor sweeps from the target area, suggesting the Zorathi are maintaining communication silence. All teams prepare for deployment. Harrison pulled his tactical vest tight and secured his ammunition pouches. Unlike his alien companions, whose equipment was integrated with their natural biology or powered armor systems, his gear was entirely external and mechanical. The simplicity that had drawn mockery from the other soldiers now seemed almost elegant in its functionality. The landing zone was a flat area approximately 2 kilometers from the nearest tunnel entrance, chosen for its tactical advantages rather than convenience. The terrain provided natural cover while allowing multiple approach routes to the target. More importantly, it was far enough from the mining complex to avoid immediate detection while close enough to reach on foot within a reasonable time frame. As the dropship touched down with a soft thud, Harrison could feel his pulse quicken with the familiar pre-combat adrenaline surge that had sustained him through countless engagements. This feeling never changed, regardless of the enemy or the weapons involved. Combat was combat, and human psychology responded to danger in ways that transcended technology. The rear ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the alien landscape of Karath 7. The planet's twin suns cast harsh shadows across the rocky terrain, while the thin atmosphere carried the metallic smell of mineral deposits and industrial decay. In the distance, the mining complex squatted like a mechanical fortress against the mountain face. The assault team deployed in standard coalition formation, with the Cromnak warriors taking point due to their superior physical capabilities and heavy armor. The Zephyrian squad spread out in a supporting pattern, their forearm physiology allowing them to carry additional equipment while maintaining combat readiness. The Vex engineers floated overhead in their anti-gravity suits, providing elevated observation and fire support capability. Harrison found himself positioned in the middle of the formation, simultaneously protected by his alien companions and isolated from the advanced tactical networks they used to coordinate their movements. Coalition forces relied heavily on real-time data, sharing, and computerized battlefield management, systems that his equipment couldn't interface with directly. The approach to the mining complex took approximately 45 minutes across terrain that alternated between loose scree and solid rock formations. The alien warriors moved with mechanical precision, their advanced equipment providing constant updates on environmental conditions, threat assessment, and tactical positioning. Harrison navigated using map, compass, and visual landmarks, methods that seemed antiquated but required no external power or signal transmission. As they drew closer to the target, the first signs of Zorathi activity became visible. Sensor arrays disguised as mining equipment tracked their approach, while carefully camouflaged defensive positions covered the main tunnel entrances. The insurgents had clearly spent considerable time preparing their fortress, and their defensive arrangements showed a sophisticated understanding of coalition military doctrine. Klixenarvex raised his primary hand in the standard halt signal, his compound eyes tracking multiple sensor readings simultaneously. Commander, my thermal scanners detect energy signatures consistent with plasma weapon emplacements at coordinates 77 Mark IV and 82 Mark IX. The defensive positions show overlapping fields of fire covering all direct approaches to the tunnel system. Warsinger Thok Magnus consulted his own tactical display before responding. Confirmed. Additionally, molecular resonance indicates the presence of metallic barriers designed to deflect energy weapons. The Zarathi have constructed prepared positions specifically optimized against our standard assault capabilities. Commander Zeltharaz's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate tactical consideration. Assessment confirms intelligence reports. The enemy has prepared specifically for energy weapon assault. Standard protocols would require orbital bombardment to neutralize defensive positions, but civilian mining operations prevent that option. Harrison studied the terrain ahead through manual observation, noting details that the sophisticated sensors might miss. The defensive positions were indeed formidable against energy weapons, but they showed certain weaknesses that kinetic assault might exploit. The plasma weapon emplacements required clear lines of sight to be effective, and their energy shields were positioned to deflect incoming fire rather than stop infiltrating infantry. Ma'am, Harrison spoke quietly, those defensive positions are designed like pillboxes from human military history. They're optimized for stopping frontal assault by overwhelming firepower. But they've got dead zones and blind spots that could be exploited by someone moving fast and staying low. The Vex squad leader's electronic voice carried skepticism. Sergeant, our tactical analysis indicates that approaching those positions would require crossing approximately 300 meters of open ground under direct fire from multiple emplacements. Even with our energy shields, such an approach would result in unacceptable casualties. Harrison nodded understanding. You're absolutely right if you approach it like a standard coalition assault. But what if someone went in alone, using terrain and speed instead of shields and overwhelming firepower? What if instead of trying to match their prepared defenses with superior technology, we use tactics they haven't planned for? The alien warriors considered this suggestion with varying degrees of interest and concern. Their military traditions emphasized technological superiority and coordinated unit action. The idea of a single soldier attempting to infiltrate prepared defensive positions using primitive equipment seemed not just risky, but potentially suicidal. Commander Zeltharaz's response reflected this institutional bias. Sergeant Harrison, while your tactical input is valuable, sending a single soldier against prepared positions defended by superior numbers and firepower contradicts established military doctrine. The risk-to-benefit ratio is unacceptable. Harrison expected this response, but he had spent enough time with alien military units to understand their decision-making processes. Ma'am, I'm not suggesting a suicide mission. I'm suggesting reconnaissance in force. Let me get close enough to provide accurate intelligence on their actual defensive capabilities while demonstrating the effectiveness of kinetic weapons in this environment. If the approach proves ineffective, I can withdraw while the rest of the team develops alternative strategies. The silence that followed was filled with the ambient sounds of alien equipment cycling through diagnostic routines and environmental processors adjusting to changing atmospheric conditions. Harrison could see the internal debate playing out in the bioluminescent patterns of Commander Zeltharaz's skin, while the other species processed the proposal through their respective tactical frameworks. Finally, Warsinger Thok Magnus spoke, his massive voice carrying reluctant respect. The human warrior speaks of reconnaissance in force, which is an acceptable tactical doctrine. If his primitive weapons prove ineffective, our superior firepower remains available to extract him and complete the mission through conventional means. Klixenarvex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The proposal has merit from an intelligence-gathering perspective. If Sergeant Harrison can provide accurate assessment of enemy defensive capabilities, our subsequent assault will be more precisely targeted and potentially more effective. Commander Zeltharaz's bioluminescent patterns shifted to decision-making mode. Very well, Sergeant. You will conduct limited reconnaissance of the defensive positions with the objective of providing intelligence on enemy capabilities and identifying potential tactical weaknesses. However, you will maintain communication contact and withdraw immediately if you encounter resistance beyond your capabilities. Harrison checked his equipment one final time, ensuring that his magazine pouches were secure and his weapon was ready for immediate use. The familiar weight of the M249 across his shoulder was reassuring in a way that no amount of advanced alien technology could match. This weapon had been refined through centuries of human warfare, and its reliability was proven through countless engagements. As he prepared to move out alone toward the Zarathi defensive positions, Harrison reflected on the fundamental difference between human and alien approaches to warfare. His alien companions relied on technological superiority and overwhelming firepower, approaching combat as an engineering problem to be solved through better systems and more powerful weapons. Humans approached warfare differently. For his species, combat was not about having the best technology. It was about adapting to circumstances, exploiting opportunities, and using whatever tools were available to achieve victory. Sometimes that meant sophisticated weapons and advanced tactics. Sometimes it meant getting close to the enemy and fighting with weapons that their ancestors would have recognized. The mission was about to begin, and with it, a demonstration of why humans had earned their place among the stars through adaptability rather than technological advancement. The approach to the Zarathi defensive line required every skill that Harrison had accumulated during 4 decades of military service. The terrain consisted of loose scree and weathered rock formations that provided concealment, but generated noise with every step. Unlike his alien companions, who moved with mechanical precision but little regard for sound discipline, Harrison had to rely on human stealth techniques developed through millennia of hunting and warfare. Each movement was calculated and deliberate. He tested every foothold before committing his weight, chose routes that avoided loose stones and unstable surfaces, and used natural shadows to break up his silhouette against the rust-colored landscape. The process was slow and methodical, requiring patience that sophisticated battlefield management systems couldn't replicate. Through his manual observation, Harrison began to understand the true sophistication of the Zarathi defensive preparation. The insurgents hadn't simply fortified existing mining structures. They had spent months creating an integrated defensive network that maximized the advantages of their captured coalition equipment while minimizing their technological disadvantages. The plasma weapon emplacements were positioned to create crossfire zones that would devastate any conventional assault. Energy shields projected overlapping barriers that could absorb tremendous amounts of incoming fire while protecting the weapon crews. Sensor arrays provided early warning of approaching enemies, while communication networks allowed coordinated response to threats. But as Harrison drew closer, he began to identify the weaknesses inherent in their approach. The defensive positions were designed by beings who understood coalition military doctrine, but had never faced human tactical innovation. They had prepared for energy weapons, automated systems, and overwhelming technological superiority. They had not prepared for someone who would crawl through the rocks with a weapon that required no power source and generated no detectable energy signature. The first Zarathi position was located approximately 50 meters from the main tunnel entrance, built into a natural rock formation that provided excellent protection from direct assault. The plasma cannon mounted in the emplacement could engage targets at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers, while its energy shield could deflect multiple hits from coalition standard weapons. Harrison settled into a natural hide among the rocks, studying the position through careful observation rather than electronic sensors. The Zarathi crew consisted of 3 individuals, rotating duties between weapon operation, sensor monitoring, and communication relay. The discipline was excellent, but their attention was focused on approaches that would be taken by conventional coalition forces. The weakness was immediately apparent to someone trained in human infiltration techniques. The energy shield was positioned to deflect incoming fire from the expected avenues of approach, but it created blind zones that could be exploited by someone moving from an unexpected direction. More importantly, the shield generators required clear lines of sight to maintain their protective barriers, creating gaps that could be exploited by precise kinetic fire. Harrison activated a short-range communication system, speaking in barely audible whispers that wouldn't carry beyond his immediate position. Overwatch, this is Scout. I'm in position to observe target Alpha. 3 crew members. Rotation schedule appears to be 15-minute intervals. Energy shield has approximately 30-degree coverage gap on a northeaster approach. Commander Zeltharaz's response came through his earpiece, her translated voice carefully modulated to avoid detection. Understood, Scout. What is your assessment of target vulnerability to kinetic engagement? Harrison studied the position more carefully, noting the placement of equipment and personnel within the defensive emplacement. The shield generators are external to the main defensive position, probably to prevent thermal interference with a plasma cannon. They're protected by armor plating, but it's designed to stop energy weapons rather than kinetic penetrators. I can neutralize the shields with sustained fire, then engage the crew while they're repositioning. The silence that followed indicated that his alien companions were processing tactical information that didn't fit their standard operational frameworks. The idea of deliberately targeting defensive systems rather than personnel was contrary to coalition doctrine, which emphasized overwhelming firepower applied directly against enemy forces. Clicks in Arvex's voice carried concern over the communication channel. Scout, engaging the shield generators will immediately alert all enemy positions to your presence. You will face concentrated fire from multiple emplacements without cover or support. This approach seems tactically unsound. Harrison appreciated the Zephyrian's concern, but it reflected the fundamental difference between alien and human approaches to combat. Overwatch, that's exactly why this approach will work. They're expecting either a frontal assault by superior forces or standoff engagement by advanced weapons. They're not prepared for someone to deliberately compromise their defensive systems and then exploit the confusion. He shifted position slightly to get a better view of the secondary defensive positions visible from his current location. The Zarathi had created an integrated network of mutually supporting emplacements, each designed to provide covering fire for the others, while maintaining overlapping fields of engagement against approaching enemies. The key is speed and precision, Harrison continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I neutralized the shield generators with short, accurate bursts, then immediately shift position to engage the crew before they can coordinate a response. While they're dealing with the immediate threat, the rest of the team can advance using routes that are now uncovered. Warsinger Thok Magnus rumbled over the communication system, his massive voice somehow managing to convey both respect and skepticism. Your tactics are unconventional, human warrior, but they contain logic. However, success depends entirely on your ability to achieve rapid, accurate fire with your primitive weapon system. Are you confident in these capabilities? Harrison's response carried the quiet confidence of a professional soldier discussing his specialty. Sir, this weapon system has been optimized for exactly this type of engagement through 8 centuries of human military development. It's designed to deliver accurate, sustained fire in situations where electronic targeting systems would be ineffective or unavailable. He checked his weapon one final time, ensuring that the first magazine was properly seated and the safety was disengaged. The M249 felt familiar and reassuring in his hands, its weight and balance refined through generations of combat experience. Unlike the sophisticated weapons carried by his alien companions, this tool required no external power source, generated no detectable emissions, and would continue functioning regardless of electromagnetic interference or system failures. Beginning approach to engagement position, Harrison whispered into his communicator. Estimate 2 minutes to optimal firing position, then immediate engagement of target systems. The final approach required him to cross approximately 20 meters of exposed ground, using a natural depression in the terrain to avoid detection by the Zarathi sensors. This was the most dangerous phase of the operation, as any mistake would expose him to overwhelming return fire from multiple defensive positions. Harrison moved with the patience and precision that had kept him alive through countless similar situations. Each movement was calculated to minimize exposure time while maximizing concealment. He used techniques developed by human military forces over millennia of warfare, adapted for an alien environment, but fundamentally unchanged in their essential principles. The engagement position offered clear lines of sight to the shield generators while providing partial concealment from return fire. From this location, Harrison could engage the defensive systems with sustained automatic fire while maintaining the option to withdraw if the situation became untenable. As he settled into his firing position, Harrison reflected on the fundamental difference between his approach and standard coalition tactics. His alien companions would have approached this problem by applying overwhelming technological superiority, using advanced weapons to neutralize the defensive positions through sheer firepower. His approach was more subtle and potentially more effective. By targeting the defensive systems rather than the defenders themselves, he could create opportunities for the entire assault team while avoiding unnecessary casualties. The Zarathi would be forced to respond to threats they hadn't anticipated, disrupting their carefully planned defensive coordination. Harrison raised the M249 to his shoulder, settling the weapon into a stable firing position against the natural rock formation. The iron sights aligned perfectly with the first shield generator, a piece of sophisticated alien technology that had been designed to stop the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. It had not been designed to stop a sustained burst of armor-piercing kinetic projectiles fired by a human soldier who understood that sometimes the old ways were more effective than the newest technology. Overwatch, this is Scout. In position and ready to engage. Beginning countdown for coordinated assault. The response from Commander Zelthara carried a mixture of anticipation and concern. Understood, Scout. All teams are in position and ready to exploit any opportunities you create. Proceed when ready. Harrison took a deep breath, settling into the shooting position that had been drilled into him through decades of training and combat experience. His finger found the trigger, and he began the mental countdown that would initiate the first demonstration of human kinetic warfare that the galaxy had witnessed in generations. In 30 seconds, the Zarathi would discover that their carefully prepared defenses had a fatal weakness. In 30 seconds, his alien companions would learn why humans had earned their reputation as the most adaptable warriors in known space. In 30 seconds, the M249 squad automatic weapon would remind the galaxy that sometimes the most sophisticated technology could be defeated by someone who understood the fundamental principles of warfare that transcended any specific tool or system. The countdown reached 0, and Harrison squeezed the trigger. The M249 erupted with a sound that cut through the thin atmosphere like thunder. The weapon's characteristic cyclic rate of fire, refined through centuries of human military engineering, sent a stream of 5.56mm armor-piercing rounds downrange at precisely the rate that Harrison's muscle memory had calculated. The first shield generator, a marvel of alien defensive technology worth more than most planetary defense budgets, disintegrated under the sustained kinetic impact. The energy barrier flickered and collapsed as its projector unit was reduced to twisted metal and sparking components. The Zarathi crew inside the defensive position looked up in shock, their compound eyes unable to process what had just happened to their supposedly impenetrable defense system. Without pausing, Harrison shifted his point of aim to the second generator. The M249's bipod legs scraped against the rock as he traversed the weapon, maintaining the steady burst fire that was the hallmark of human squad automatic weapons doctrine. The second generator lasted approximately 3 seconds under the concentrated kinetic assault before joining its companion in technological ruin. The Zarathi defensive position, moments before an impregnable fortress protected by cutting-edge energy shields, was suddenly exposed and vulnerable. The plasma cannon crew scrambled to rotate their weapon toward this unexpected threat, but their heavy energy weapon had been designed for long-range engagement against conventional coalition forces, not close-quarters response to infiltrating infantry. Harrison was already moving before the second shield generator finished exploding. Human infantry tactics emphasized speed and aggression once the element of surprise was lost, and for decades of combat experience had burned these principles into his reflexes. He bounded from his firing position to a secondary location 15 meters away, using natural terrain features to break up his silhouette while maintaining visual contact with the target. The Zarathi plasma cannon discharged with a brilliant flash of superheated energy, the bolt striking the rock formation where Harrison had been positioned seconds earlier. Molten stone exploded outward as temperatures briefly exceeded those found in stellar cores. But the human sergeant was already engaging from his new position. The M249's next burst caught the plasma cannon operator's center mass, the kinetic projectiles penetrating the alien's natural carapace and dropping him immediately. The remaining two Zarathi took cover behind their weapon emplacement, but their defensive position had been designed to repel external assault, not defend against someone who had already penetrated their perimeter. Over the communication system, Harrison could hear the excited chatter of his alien companions as they processed what they were witnessing. The sophisticated tactical analysis systems that governed coalition military doctrine had no framework for what was happening. A single soldier with primitive kinetic weapons had just neutralized a defensive position that should have required orbital bombardment or coordinated assault by multiple heavy weapons teams. "Scout, this is Overwatch." Commander Zeltharaz's voice carried a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Target Alpha appears to be neutralized. All secondary positions are reacting to your engagement. Please confirm your status." Harrison reloaded the M249 with practiced efficiency, his hands performing the magazine change without conscious thought while his eyes tracked the movement of Zarathi forces in the adjacent defensive positions. "Overwatch, Scout is mobile and continuing mission. Target Alpha is neutralized, beginning approach to Target Beta. Recommend immediate advance by all teams to exploit enemy confusion." The second Zarathi position was approximately 70 meters from the first, positioned to provide mutual support and overlapping fields of fire. But the insurgents had based their defensive planning on coalition tactical doctrine, which emphasized prolonged firefights between static positions. They had not prepared for someone who would neutralize one position and immediately assault the next without pausing to consolidate gains or await reinforcement. As Harrison moved toward Target Beta, he could see the Zarathi crew frantically trying to reposition their plasma cannon to engage him. The weapon was a masterpiece of engineering, capable of melting through starship armor at extreme ranges, but it required several seconds to traverse and stabilize between shots. Against a target moving at human infantry speed across broken terrain, those seconds were an eternity. The approach to the second position required crossing a stretch of open ground that would normally be considered suicidal. Energy weapons would have illuminated Harrison like a beacon, making him an easy target for every Zarathi gunner in the complex. But kinetic weapons produced no energy signature, and his movement techniques were based on human principles of cover and concealment that his enemies didn't recognize. Harrison reached the optimal engagement position just as the Zarathi plasma cannon achieved target lock. For a split second, human reflexes competed directly against alien technology, with the outcome dependent entirely on speed and accuracy rather than technological superiority. The M249 won. Harrison's burst caught the shield generators of Target Beta just as the plasma cannon fired, the kinetic rounds destroying the protective systems a fraction of a second before the energy bolt passed through the space his head had occupied. The near miss was close enough that he felt the heat wash across his face, but the destruction of the shield generators left the defensive position exposed and vulnerable. The remaining Zarathi crew found themselves in the impossible situation of trying to defend a position designed for long-range engagement against an enemy who was already inside their defensive perimeter. Their energy weapons, optimized for penetrating advanced armor and shields, were poorly suited for close-quarters combat against a target that relied on speed and maneuverability rather than technological protection. Harrison's next burst swept across the defensive position with mechanical precision, the sustained automatic fire demonstrating why human military doctrine had retained kinetic weapons long after most galactic civilizations had abandoned them. In confined spaces, against confused enemies, volume of fire often mattered more than individual shot effectiveness. Target Beta was neutralized within 15 seconds of initial contact. The destruction of two defensive positions in rapid succession sent shock waves through the entire Zarathi defensive network. Their carefully coordinated system began to collapse as individual positions attempted to reposition to engage this unexpected threat. communication channels filled with confused reports as the insurgents tried to understand how their prepared defenses were being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons. Over his communication system, Harrison could hear the coalition forces beginning their advance. The Cromnac warriors moved with their characteristic ground-shaking gait, their molecular disruptors finally able to advance without facing immediate destruction from prepared defensive positions. The Zephyrian squad spread out in their standard formation, plasma rifles powering up as they acquired targets that were no longer protected by energy shields. All teams, this is Overwatch. Commander Zeltharaz's voice carried the authority of someone whose tactical assumptions had just been fundamentally altered. Scout has neutralized primary defensive positions. Advance immediately to exploit enemy confusion. Cromnac team, engage remaining heavy weapons. Zephyrian squad, suppress enemy communications. Vex team, provide overwatch and fire support. Harrison was already moving toward target Charlie, the third defensive position in his assigned sector. The Zarathi were beginning to adapt to his tactics, with individual positions attempting to coordinate their response rather than reacting independently. This was exactly what he had expected. Enemy adaptation was a constant in warfare, and human military doctrine emphasized continuous tactical evolution to maintain the initiative. But the Zarathi adaptation was based on their understanding of coalition military principles, which emphasized technological superiority and overwhelming firepower. They were attempting to counter his assault using energy weapons and sophisticated targeting systems, tools that were poorly suited for engaging a single infiltrator using cover and maneuver tactics. The approach to target Charlie required different techniques, as the Zarathi had begun to anticipate his movement patterns. Harrison shifted to human urban warfare tactics, using building-to-building movement techniques adapted for the mining complex environment. The key was unpredictability. Every approach route needed to be different, every engagement needed to use different timing and positioning. As he maneuvered toward the third position, Harrison began to understand the true scope of the Zarathi defensive preparation. The mining complex wasn't just a hideout. It was a carefully constructed fortress designed to maximize the effectiveness of captured coalition equipment while minimizing the advantages that advanced technology normally provided. The tunnels themselves were lined with metallic composites that would amplify electromagnetic pulse effects, potentially disabling energy weapons throughout the complex. The defensive positions were arranged to create overlapping fields of fire that could concentrate overwhelming firepower on any conventional assault route. Most importantly, the entire system was designed by beings who understood coalition tactical doctrine better than most coalition officers. But understanding coalition doctrine wasn't the same as understanding human military principles. The Zarathi had prepared to fight energy weapons with energy shields, sophisticated targeting systems with electronic countermeasures, and overwhelming firepower with prepared defensive positions. They had not prepared to fight someone who would crawl through their defensive network with weapons that predated galactic civilization, using tactics developed through millennia of human warfare, relying on adaptability rather than technological superiority. Harrison reached the engagement position for target Charlie, just as the coalition main assault reached the outer defensive perimeter. Through his communication system, he could hear the distinctive sounds of galactic warfare as plasma rifles exchanged fire with captured coalition weapons. The molecular disruptors of the Cromnac warriors created their characteristic spatial distortion effects as they unmade defensive barriers at the atomic level. But the most distinctive sound was the continued chatter of the M249 as Harrison engaged the third defensive position. The weapon's cyclic rate of fire had become the tempo of the entire assault, with coalition forces timing their advances to the destruction of each Zarathi strongpoint. Target Charlie lasted slightly longer than its predecessors, approximately 25 seconds from initial engagement to complete neutralization. The crew had attempted to abandon their prepared position and reposition their plasma cannon for mobile defense, but kinetic weapons were particularly effective against targets in the open. As the third defensive position fell silent, Harrison realized that something fundamental had changed in the tactical situation. The coalition forces were no longer following standard assault doctrine. Instead of methodically reducing each position through overwhelming technological superiority, they were exploiting the chaos created by his kinetic assault to advance rapidly through the defensive network. Commander Zeltharaz's voice confirmed his assessment. All teams, enemy defensive coordination is collapsing. Continue rapid advance. Scout, your demonstration has been highly effective. Please maintain suppressive fire while main assault elements reach tunnel entrances. Harrison smiled grimly as he reloaded the M249. The weapon had performed exactly as human military doctrine predicted. In the right tactical situation, with proper employment and adequate ammunition, kinetic weapons remained as effective as they had been for centuries of human warfare. The lesson was about to become even more emphatic as the assault moved into the tunnel system itself, where the Zarathi would discover that their prepared defenses had been optimized for the wrong kind of enemy. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead like the mouth of some mechanical predator, its metallic framework scarred by decades of mining operations and recent military modifications. The Zarathi had transformed the industrial infrastructure into a fortress entrance, complete with overlapping fields of fire, sensor arrays, and energy barriers designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. Harrison crouched behind a natural rock formation approximately 50 meters from the main entrance, studying the defensive arrangements through manual observation while his alien companions deployed their sophisticated scanning equipment. The contrast between their approaches had become even more pronounced now that they were preparing to enter the confined environment of the tunnel system. Commander Zeltharaz's bioluminescent patterns indicated deep tactical consideration as she processed the sensor data from her various teams. Intelligence assessment confirms that the tunnel system has been extensively modified for defensive purposes. Metallic composites throughout the structure will amplify electromagnetic pulse effects, potentially disabling our energy weapon systems. Vex clicked his mandibles nervously, his four hands automatically checking his plasma rifle's power coupling for the third time in 5 minutes. Commander, my thermal scanners indicate that the tunnel walls contain sufficient metallic content to create reflection zones for plasma weapons fire. Engaging targets in confined spaces could result in thermal feedback that would damage our own equipment. Warsinger Thok Magnus rumbled his agreement. The massive Cromnak warrior, looking uncomfortable for the first time since the mission began. The molecular disruptors will function in the tunnel environment, but spatial distortion effects in confined spaces could compromise structural integrity. We risk collapsing the tunnels with our own weapons. The Vex squad leader floated nearby in his anti-gravity suit, his electronic voice carrying uncharacteristic uncertainty. Gravitational pulse weapons are specifically contraindicated for underground combat. The risk of creating localized spatial collapse in confined spaces exceeds acceptable operational parameters. Harrison listened to his alien companions articulate the tactical challenges they faced with equipment that had been designed for open-field combat against conventional enemies. Their weapons represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology, but that same sophistication made them poorly suited for the kind of environment they were about to enter. Ma'am, Harrison spoke quietly. This is exactly the kind of situation where human infantry tactics were developed. Tunnel fighting, urban warfare, confined spaces where technological superiority becomes a liability rather than an advantage. My weapon system was specifically designed for environments where energy weapons would be ineffective or dangerous to the user. He hefted the M249 slightly, the weapon feeling even more familiar and reassuring after its performance during the surface engagement. Kinetic weapons don't care about metallic tunnel walls or electromagnetic interference. They don't generate thermal signatures that could reflect back at the user. Most importantly, they don't risk bringing down the ceiling on our own heads. Commander Zeltharaz's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate decision-making mode. The success of Harrison's surface assault had fundamentally altered her understanding of the tactical situation, but leading coalition forces into confined spaces with primitive weapons contradicted decades of military training and institutional doctrine. Sergeant Harrison, your performance during the surface engagement exceeded all expectations and demonstrated capabilities that our tactical analysis systems had not anticipated. However, entering the tunnel system represents a significant escalation of risk for all team members. Harrison nodded respectfully. Understood, Mom. But the Zarathi chose this environment specifically because it neutralizes our technological advantages. They've spent months preparing these tunnels to be a killing ground for coalition forces equipped with standard energy weapons. They're expecting us to fight on their terms, using equipment that they understand and have prepared to counter. The entrance to the tunnel system remained ominously silent, but Harrison's experience suggested that this quiet was deceptive. The Zarathi had demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning in their surface defenses, and they would certainly have prepared even more elaborate arrangements for the underground fighting where their advantages would be maximized. The key is changing the terms of engagement, Harrison continued. Instead of fighting the kind of battle they prepared for, we use tactics and weapons they haven't anticipated. In those tunnels, my primitive kinetic weapon becomes more effective in your advanced energy systems. Warsinger Thok Magnus leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the tactical discussion. Human warrior, you speak of changing terms of engagement, but you are one soldier with limited ammunition facing potentially hundreds of enemies in prepared positions. How do you propose to achieve tactical success against such overwhelming odds? Harrison's smile was grim, but confident. Sir, humans have been fighting in tunnels and confined spaces since before we developed written language. We've refined tunnel warfare tactics through thousands of years of military evolution. The principles don't change just because the enemy is alien or the environment is on another planet. He gestured toward the tunnel entrance, noting details that sophisticated sensors might miss. Look at how they've arranged their defensive positions. They're optimized for stopping energy weapons and conventional assault techniques. But they've created dead zones and blind spots that could be exploited using infiltration tactics and sustained kinetic fire. The alien warriors considered this assessment through their respective tactical frameworks, but Harrison could see that they struggled to understand warfare that didn't depend on technological superiority. Their military traditions emphasized overwhelming firepower and sophisticated systems, concepts that became liabilities in confined underground fighting. Commander Zelthara made her decision with the authority of someone who had learned to trust tactical expertise regardless of its source. Very well, Sergeant. You will take point position for tunnel infiltration with full tactical authority over approach routes and engagement techniques. However, you will be accompanied by volunteer personnel from each species to provide backup and ensure mission continuity. Harrison appreciated the compromise, though he privately doubted that his alien companions will be able to adapt quickly enough to tunnel fighting techniques. Understood, ma'am. I recommend that supporting personnel maintain minimum safe distance and avoid using energy weapons unless absolutely necessary. In confined spaces, muzzle flash and thermal signatures will compromise everyone's position. Clixonar Vex volunteered immediately, his compound eyes tracking multiple environmental readings as he spoke. I will accompany Sergeant Harrison. My thermal imaging capabilities may provide valuable intelligence, even if my plasma rifle is not suitable for confined engagement. Warsinger Thok Magnus rumbled his participation, though his massive frame would clearly be a disadvantage in tunnel fighting. The Cromnac will provide support. If molecular disruptors cannot be used safely, our physical capabilities remain formidable. The Vex squad leader's electronic voice carried determined resignation. Anti-gravity systems may prove advantageous in tunnel environments. I will provide elevated observation and communication relay. Within 10 minutes, the improvised tunnel assault team was ready to enter the mining complex. Harrison took point position, carrying the M249 in a configuration optimized for close-quarters combat. His alien companions spread out in a supporting formation that emphasized their respective species' advantages while minimizing their technological vulnerabilities. The entrance to the tunnel system was larger than Harrison had expected, clearly modified from its original mining configuration to accommodate military equipment. The metallic walls showed recent installation of defensive systems, sensor arrays, and communication networks that turned the industrial infrastructure into a sophisticated fortress. But as they penetrated deeper into the tunnel system, Harrison began to understand the true scope of the Zarathi preparation. This wasn't just a hideout. It was an underground city designed specifically for prolonged resistance against coalition forces. The tunnels branched and interconnected in a maze-like pattern that would confuse conventional assault forces while providing multiple routes for defenders to reposition and coordinate their resistance. The first contact came approximately 200 meters into the tunnel system, at a junction where three passages converged into a natural choke point. The Zarathi had positioned a heavy plasma cannon to cover all three approaches, with energy shields providing protection for the weapon crew and sensor arrays giving early warning of approaching enemies. Harrison's response was immediate and decisive. Instead of attempting a frontal assault against the prepared position, he used human tunnel fighting tactics that had been developed through centuries of underground warfare. Moving with the speed and silence that only human infantry could achieve, he flanked the position using a maintenance tunnel that the Zarathi had overlooked in their defensive planning. The M249's burst fire echoed through the tunnels like thunder, the sustained automatic fire destroying the plasma cannon's power coupling before the crew could rotate their weapon to engage this unexpected threat. The confined space amplified the sound of kinetic weapons fire, creating a psychological effect that energy weapons couldn't replicate. As the defensive position collapsed under sustained kinetic assault, Harrison could hear the Zarathi communication networks becoming increasingly frantic. Their carefully planned defensive coordination was breaking down as they struggled to respond to tactics that didn't fit any scenario they had prepared for. The advance continued deeper into the tunnel system, with Harrison systematically dismantling defensive positions that had been designed to stop coalition energy weapons. Each engagement demonstrated the effectiveness of human infantry tactics in confined spaces, while his alien companions provided support and began to understand why their sophisticated equipment had limitations that primitive kinetic weapons didn't share. By the time they reached the central command chamber of the mining complex, the Zarathi resistance had effectively collapsed. Their defensive network, so carefully designed to exploit coalition technological advantages, had proven completely inadequate against human military doctrine adapted for alien environments. Commander Zeltharaz's voice over the communication system carried a mixture of admiration and thoughtful consideration. Mission accomplished, all teams. Sergeant Harrison's demonstration has been highly educational for all coalition forces. Intelligence suggests that enemy resistance throughout the complex has ceased following the neutralization of their central command structure. As they emerged from the tunnel system into the harsh sunlight of Karath 7, Harrison reflected on the fundamental lesson that had been demonstrated during this engagement. Advanced technology was a powerful tool, but it was not a substitute for tactical understanding, adaptability, and the willingness to use whatever weapons were most effective for specific situations. The M249 squad automatic weapon had reminded the galaxy that sometimes the most sophisticated solution to a military problem was the simplest one. Sometimes the best way to defeat advanced defensive systems was to use weapons that those systems hadn't been designed to stop. Most importantly, sometimes the oldest military principles remained the most effective, regardless of how much technology had advanced. The alien warriors of the Coalition had learned something valuable about human military capabilities, but more importantly, they had learned something about the relationship between technology and effectiveness that would influence their tactical thinking for years to come. In the end, the laughter had stopped. The old weapon had spoken, and the galaxy had listened.